If you made it this far, you made it to part two of my essay, Americanistan. I do want to point out one thing before I go into it. I use a word, V-line, into the later on in this essay. V-line is something I think you should look up. It's best looked up with image. If you have safe search off, be prepared for pornographic images. Feline are something like Vanna Whites of Italy, but a lot more provocative. And they're essentially female participants in Italian TV that act as um, voiceless, irrelevant, but at the same time very relevant uh, uh, props on the set. They're young women. They're extremely attractive, and they're in very revealing clothes. I don't know if Italy allows for nudity, but if they do, they'll provide some nudity on it. And they tend to be on the sides of male figures that are host of shows, and it's very chauvinistic setup and use of young women. It's actually a very in demand profession in Italy. So again, you can look that up, but I use that a little bit further down the line. So now, on to part two of Americanistan. While most people would credit the Allied forces with the defeat of the axis of evil, I don't credit them with the development of a conscience able to put fascism on the shelf of the human experience, with cannibalism and human sacrifice. I know that the notion of transforming the human mind through concentrated collective efforts is a stretch into sci-fi. If it were possible, Gandhi would have succeeded in raising the participants of that civil war into human beings capable of celebrating their diversity. King would have defeated the counter-revolutionary forces of his inner circle. But how do we credit Hitler for whatever it is we feel he accomplished? What is it that garners any replica, even the mere accusation of similarities of a Hitleresque or Stalinist movement operating behind one man, the identification of evil, even inhuman? Can this be any more Wizard of Oz than that? Somewhat in reverse? Unless Hitler or Stalin are merely the curtain, the seductive V-line. For in the final analysis, Hitler, Stalin, Chile's Pinochet, Egypt's Mubarak, and every U.S. president ever democratically elected by the populous poor citizens are not central figures. They aren't even the equivalent of a show host. They ultimately amount to V-line sideshow, to a V-line sideshow, a curtain, so to speak, a simple object of no significant value to the promotion of human dignity and equality, but great for ratings. For the scientific manipulation of the operations of the human brain towards the goal of creating a relationship that appears to be based on commonality, usually the idea of representation. Quote, this is how I feel about the same thing, close quote. Or, quote, that person really knows what it's like, close quote. Well, this is unquestionably a true realization to the individual. There simultaneously are a series of chemical events going on in the human brain that are triggered by visual and audio stimulation that result in physical feelings commonly referred to as emotions at best and intuition in most isolating cases. I assume that emotions lead to the formation of collectives. The core of this assumption is based on my theory that emotions are impossible to sustain absent social groups, i.e. religion, denominations, political affiliations, families, militaries, etc., etc. Intuition is something of an isolated experience, or isolating experience, something one feels they know, as opposed to learned, apart from information gathered socially, subject solely to the evidence that contributes proof, or knowing I'm right, while ranking contrary data with the likes of unicorns and other gods. My intuition compels me to suspect that if enough people develop strong intuitions, that social bonds become reduced to less than social bonds, weaken emotional connections, and pave the way for groups of people concluding that they're right based on feeling right, dismissing the actual effects of any of their actions. Germans just knew what they were doing was in the best interest of their nation, patriotism, thus good for the whole world, even if it meant murdering millions of actual people. This is a nation of intuitive people, if you ask me. But what I believe to be in the right direction and what you believe to be right can never be on the same playing field, let alone the same moral plane. So I'm obliged to relinquish my far-fetched idea of whatever the hell I'm talking about, anyways, in exchange for the reality you feel I am too weak to accept, or vice versa. Thus, we find the pseudo-eternal stand-up of the concept of good versus evil, us versus them, light against dark, strength against weakness, democracy in place of democracy, in which we find ourselves throughout modern history. Obviously, meaning that things are the way they should be or the only way they can be. Either way, we will not budge from what we know is right, even if we violate it to prove it the truth. After all, sacrifice is proof of love, and love is pure, not self-destructive, externally manipulated behavior. Let's not over-exaggerate the capabilities of love now. Love, at its best, can appreciate the sorrow of poverty, illness, and imprisonment, but it can't influence democracy or war in any way that calls into question the very logic that there is a weaker party. Love begins with what one can offer or withhold. Love can expose the visual disapproval of injustice, but can't manage to pierce deeper into the human heart than a commitment to humanity that compels one to proactively seek out authoritarian imbalances in humanity and devote their humanity in excess to both the predatory and feeder cultures that are at the root of all modern society's daily operations. Love is a nice sentiment, great for theatrical drama, but what is its expression that we cherish and idolize so grandly? The idea that it belongs first to one capable of it, to offer to another, that can only have our love when we are willing to give it, simultaneously reserving the right to revoke it? Have we, humanity, created the idea of a single God in our last-ditch hope to preserve the fiat of love? I know some say that the faults of individual people or collective groups regarding their ability to love is not evidence of the faulty half-ass idea of love, but of their evilness, of some proof that love is beyond normal humans, thus divine. Divinity being essentially what a human is absent divinity, an individual governed by their own value system, either based on love or hate. In the end, or the new beginning, what do we dream democracy is? Because religions are so sacred to us as individuals, how does my religion view democracy? Based on that view, should I support or oppose democracy? And does democracy have constraints my religion exists to impose or sustain? Or does my religion live in me to expand democracy's potential through the operation of faith in me, among those around me? Can democracy function in my religion, or is my religion diametrically opposed to the functions that define democracy? As much as these questions need to be answered by more and more of the human family, they can only be addressed on individual basis, making Gandhi's words, positive change moves at a snail's pace, make too much sense. Or King's stated belief that good temporarily defeated is more powerful than evil. So it comes to how I and you can address these questions, or if we can even ask them. I really appreciate the time you took to listen to this video. I sincerely hope that you leave comments, questions, and likes. And I would vote against dislikes, but feel free. Thanks.